What's up, everyone? It's Jellison. We're back here with another episode of Jellison Podcast, and today I have WTHR sports reporter Tannebaum. Taylor, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be on here. Thank you so much for contacting me. I'm honored.
Well, thank you for responding, because it's kind of hard being someone that is like getting my foot in the door. So it's awesome to get cool people like you to come on the podcast. So today, obviously, is kind of a sad day for us Hoosiers. The 500 was canceled due to the pandemic. But you were down there today. What were you doing down there at the track?
Yeah, so obviously Sunday is race day. I am not a native Hoosier. So this was only going to be my second Indianapolis 500 because last year was my first. But obviously extremely disappointing. I know for everybody, obviously, at Channel 13 at WTHR, my boss is Dave Calabro, and he's the voice of the track. And this has been his life for so long. So it was a pretty disappointing day for him. But we got a chance to actually go out there, the two of us and our photographer, and we got to go live from there this morning because we are an NBC station. And NBC is still doing a bunch of coverage for the 500, just, commemorating last year and looking ahead to what's to come in August. And it was strange, it was quiet. There's very few people there, maybe less than 10 people around, and we're all spread out. And I could hear the birds chirping. Obviously, no crowd, no cars, no noise. It was silent. It just seemed like another day at the track. So certainly a change, but what was cool is there were still fans outside, lots of fans outside gate one, tailgating, kind of hanging out with each other, social distancing, and just doing what they do, because a lot of people I talk to, they don't know what else to do on race day on a Sunday here in Indianapolis. It's just what they do. So it was cool to see people still care, and all the people I talked to said they'll still be there in August. So fingers crossed that we can have some fans, and the Indy 500 is going to go on as planned August 23rd.
Yeah, I'm not really into racing, so it's not as big of a deal to me as it is to some people, but it's probably the biggest thing in Indiana, I'd have to guess.
100%. And it's the largest single day sporting event in the world. 300,000 plus human beings in one place. That doesn't just happen just because, people are there because they want to be there, generations after generation, handing down tickets. People sit in the same seats their whole lives. It's special, and people travel here for it too, but really, it's the people of Indiana that are the glue behind this race. And it's pretty cool to see how much people love it, because it just reminds you, especially during this time, like how much sports truly do matter and bring us together, and how important the Indianapolis 500 is. So yeah, safe to say at least the people who are outside the gate today are diehard Indy 500 fans.
So the people you talked to, were they bummed out, or were they just excited that we're actually going to be able to see it in August?
Both. They were pretty bummed out. People use the word today's like sort of mourning. People use the word devastating. People, almost got emotional talking about it, just because you have so many memories and things that happen in your family, and you meet people and life moments that happen here. So they were definitely sad, but understanding. Like, they understood why it's canceled for right now. They understood why it's postponed. They understood why, you can't have 300,000 plus people in there right now. And they were all looking forward to August. They're excited. They all pretty much said, it's not going to be May. It's not May. It's not going to be the entire month of May, but it'll still be just as exciting, if not more exciting. I talked to a couple drivers this morning as well, Spencer Piggott, Marcus Erickson, Felix Rosenquist, who both drive for Chip Ganassi. And all of them said they're just really hyped for August, and they know Indianapolis is going to come out hard and excited, and they're just looking forward to being at the track, because as Spencer said, it's rare to go more than 12. You don't go more than 12 months without a race at that track, or an IndyCar race at least. So it'll be even more exciting when they do get there.
So we've kind of talked about how the pandemic has affected the 500, but how has it affected you specifically in what you do for your job?
Yes, so of course, being a sports anchor reporter, my job revolves around sports, and sports are not happening really right now. We're starting to have some live sports again, but it's been a different challenge. I will say I'm grateful that I still have a job, because there are still stories to be told. but it's certainly different. I work from home as opposed to in the station right now because really only a handful of people who are allowed in there right now, so as to limit contact with each other. Do everything remotely on a computer. A lot of my stand-ups are shot inside in my living room. You get to see a lot of people's homes right now, you know. Obviously, we're not really covering events necessarily, but we're still covering stories. So you're still covering the athletes. You're still covering the things that they're going through, the things that they're doing, maybe helping their communities or how they're working out at home or high schools and how they're staying fit and together as a team. There's still stories out there. There's always a story and there's always someone who has a story to tell. So while it's changed the way you do things, it's less reporting, obviously, on a live event, but it's more reporting on human beings and circumstances. So, you know, covered some virtual iRacing stuff for NASCAR and IndyCar. You're covering Colts doing their virtual training camp. You're covering the Pacers staying fit at home, waiting to see if their season's going to resume. So there's people to talk to, but it's definitely different not going places. And it'll be interesting to see once this all gets back to normal, whatever normal is, what things are going to be like in the sporting world.
What other things have you been doing during this time period to kind of keep your sanity and not drive yourself insane?
Let's see. What other things have I been doing? A lot of Netflixing, of course. I watched all of Ozark, all 3 seasons. I watched Dead to Me, which is funny, on Netflix. Some movies. I'm a big Twister movie fan. I love the movie Twister, and I finally just purchased it, and I watched that a few times. You know, FaceTiming my family. They live in South Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, so FaceTiming them and my friends. You know, I'm getting to talk to some people a little bit more because I'm home, working from home, so you can take a little bit more breaks. You know, working out in the living room as opposed to going to the gym. So doing that a little bit more, which has been good. You know, I've been self-motivated. So just little things like that, nothing crazy, getting outside and taking a walk, you know, down Mass Ave and back home again. So just trying to stay sane the same way everybody else is, just Netflix, chill, and keep in touch with family and friends.
Yeah. How is Ozark? I've heard a lot of good things about it, but I've never seen it for myself.
So when we hang up, you're going to go watch Ozark because I loved it. I thought it was an incredible show. It's there's parts almost that are funny too, because it's obviously very intense. But there's parts that are funny too. It's sort of dark humor. And it keeps you on the edge of your seat. Like there were times when I had to like shut it off before going to bed just because my dreams would have been crazy if not. But it keeps you on the edge of your seat. You never know what's going to happen next. And I just thought it was a great show. And now I'm just ready for season 4 because they leave you hanging. So I won't it was one of the best endings to a season I've ever seen in my life. So I'll just leave it at that for season 3 because you're going to watch it. And then you'll get back to me on how good it is. But I think you'll enjoy it.
All right. Well, I guess I will have to watch it now.
Are you on any shows right now? Are you a big Netflixer?
No, I mean, I don't really watch TV shows or movies a whole lot. I'm kind of weird like that, but I mean, I need to start because we're not gonna have sports for a while anyway. So I need to start watching them.
Ozark it is.
Yeah. So briefly explain what all that you do for WTHR.
So for WTHR, technically my title is a sports anchor reporter. I typically anchor the weekends is really my niche, but during the week I'm a reporter. So cover sports, Colts, Pacers, high school, INDYCAR, the Indians, you know, whatever stories are in the community, you cover it. You turn stories for every newscast, so the 6 and 11 o'clock every single day. Obviously, you call highlights. I go to a lot of games. You know, every Sunday we're at the Colts. We're at as many Pacers games as we can. So my daily job is to just get the story, shoot it. Sometimes I have a photographer. Sometimes it's myself as a multimedia journalist. I do a lot of my own work, so I'll work my own camera, get the interviews myself, put it together on my laptop, and send it into the station, and be on camera for it. So it seems like, I know a lot of people think this is a glamorous job all the time, but it's definitely a grind. It takes some work. It takes a lot of studying. It takes some patience, and it takes hard work to get to where you want to be. So that's pretty much my daily job, is just turning stories, sports stories for every newscast, and trying to inform the people.
Have you found it being hard to find interviews or to get interviews like after a game? If say like the Pacers lose, they get blown out. Is it just more difficult to find interviews during that?
Is it more difficult? Maybe. They're always around. They're always going to be there. The locker room is open. We'll see how that changes after the pandemic, but the locker room is open. So technically they have to be in there to be available to speak. Some of them are very short when it comes to after a loss, especially if they had a bad game. Some of them will take the brunt of it and speak up and speak for the team. So I don't necessarily find it harder. You just have to know that certain guys may not want to talk to you. But as you do this job, you tend to find out who's the talker and who's not. There are certain people you can always go to that will talk, and they will give you something. So you just kind of figure that out along the way. So, I mean, if you want some insight on that for the Colts, someone who will always talk, even if it's a loss, linebacker Anthony Walker. You can always get something from him. He's always a wonderful interview. That's always a go-to, someone you can get something from. If you're talking Pacers, you always have Victor Oladipo. Doug McDermott is always willing to talk. So, you have your certain guys who you can rely on, even if they've taken an L.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. But so you mentioned that your job is a lot of hard work that people don't see. I saw a story on the Dan Patrick show. Someone called in and said that his daughter got a degree in, it was like sports broadcasting or something along those lines. And he asked Dan like what advice he had for her, and he said that it's very difficult to get into and at the beginning. So like take any job that you can, even if it's getting coffee for people or whatever, wherever the case may be. And then you can work your way up from that. So I was wondering if you had any experiences like that, and then what your advice would be to someone who is trying to get into sports journalism or broadcasting.
Yeah, so I was never really the coffee runner, I definitely interned throughout college. I interned in South Florida at the Fox station down there. I interned at a PR firm, and that's actually, it's not television, but it's actually where I met the man who hooked me up with my first job. My first job was in Dothan, Alabama, which most people on here who listen to this will have no clue where that is. It is southeast Alabama. It is about a 2.5-hour drive north of the beach in the Florida Panhandle. So that's pretty much the only reason why people know it, is if you're coming from up here, actually in Indiana, you probably have to drive through Dothan to get to the beach if you're going to Panama City or Destin or one of those places. Small town, very small market. You get paid next to nothing. You live paycheck to paycheck. Mom and dad still have to help you. But it was where you really cut your teeth, and you meet a lot of people who are in the same position as you, young, trying to make it. So you form some great relationships in that first job, and then you meet people because you go to events where bigger people are, and people in bigger markets are, and you network, and then you go from there. Going to small places like that is important because you can make mistakes in small markets and learn, and you're not going to get shunned for it necessarily. If you come straight to Indianapolis and you make a mistake, people are going to know because there's a lot of eyeballs, okay? And they'll call you out for it. It happens to me. It happened to me today. There was a mishap on one of the graphics in our Indianapolis 500 special, and I see it on Twitter. Someone called me out for it. So, you have to be prepared for that. But the reason I'm okay with that now is because I know I've put in my work in the past, and I've made those mistakes, and it's hurt, and it's been demoralizing sometimes, but those are the places where you really learn about yourself. You learn about what you're good at. You can hone your skills. So the same advice for other people that I would say is, you may not want to move there. You may not want to take the job, but in the long term, it will help you. Everything is temporary, right? So if you don't like it, you can move. If you don't like it, you can change, but you have to at least try it. And in this business, you have to go for it. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to bet on yourself. There's going to be people along the way who tell you can't do something. There's plenty of people who've made it big time in this business who've been fired or have not been hired because people told them they weren't good enough. But you have to keep trying because you're going to get no's. So that's my biggest piece of advice is just bet on yourself, believe in yourself, and take that leap, even if you're nervous or scared, or it doesn't seem like, that's where you want to go. In the end, it will pay off, and everything is temporary. So you can always change your situation. And network. That's the other thing is network, meet as many people as you can. It's all about who you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh,
that's
for
my
sure.
biggest piece of advice. So, even if you are getting coffee for someone and you're out of college and you're not getting paid for your job, that's okay, because the person you're getting coffee for may know someone where that you can get hired. So always just always do what you can where you are, the most you can, even when you make it bigger. It's always important to meet people, because somebody is in your life for a reason. They get put in your life for a reason, and you don't know what that reason is. So you got to make the best of it.
Yeah. So, how did you begin your career?
So I graduated from Florida State University in 2009. And I actually had this job lined up, that job in Dothan. I was the weekend sports anchor and reporter in Dothan. I had it lined up a couple of weeks before I graduated. I interned for no money in Tallahassee while I was going to school. And a guy that I interned for used to be in television. He got out to do PR. And he said to me, my old boss works in Dothan. He's the general manager there. I want you to just drive over there, because it was only an hour and a half away. Take your reel, take your tape, go show it to him. I don't know if they have a job available, but it's a good interview experience, right? So I was like, all right, whatever. So I get in my car, I drive to Dothan, I go meet him. And it was just a common courtesy, because it's someone I had met from interning wanted to help me out, because I'm a decent person and he's trying to help the next person, They didn't necessarily have a job for me. They had a news job. I didn't want to do news. And I hadn't really put out any other sports feelers yet. So I was like, you know what, I'll pass on this one and I'll wait and see. Well, they ended up really liking me regardless. And a sports job opened up like 2 weeks later, miraculously. And they called me and they said, do you want the sports job? And I still hadn't really looked anywhere else for a sports job. So I was kind of upset at first, because I was like, I kind of wanted to test the waters. I wanted to see where I could get a job. Maybe I could do better. And I was told, take it, go, take it. You never know when the next job is going to come. Just cut your teeth and go. So I accepted it. And I got pretty lucky in that sense. But from there, it's been a grind. I stayed 3 years there in a very small town. And then I moved north to North Alabama, in Huntsville, Alabama, spent 2 years there. And then I moved to Indianapolis. So, and my family's in Florida. So, that's how I got in, is just through an internship. And then you just kind of keep climbing. It was through an internship, through someone I met through an internship that wasn't even in television. It was in PR. So you never know.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see, or to hear about where people started. Because for me, I changed I'm on my third major at Purdue, but I changed my major, and I sent an email to a guy. He runs Hammer and Rails. It's through SB Nation and Fox Media. So I messaged him, the boss, I guess, of Hammer and Rails, and I was like, hey, I'm just getting my foot in the door or whatever. If you need anyone to write, I'll do it. And he goes, yeah, we need someone for women's basketball. And I was like, oh crap, I don't want to do that. But and then I took it. I wasn't getting paid or anything, but it got my foot in the door. And then, already in the last 6 months, I've done more cool stuff than I had in my entire life. I got to cover Purdue Purdue basketball games, both men's and women's. I got to go to press conferences, meet a bunch of people, and now I'm actually getting paid from it, because they liked how I did. So
there you go. And you're ahead of the curve. You're working before you even graduate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for you, the more people you meet now, the more connections you're going to have later. So, see, that's a prime example. You didn't want to do women's basketball. No knock on women's basketball, but that just wasn't what you had in mind, right? And here you are.
Yeah, cool. It's been a crazy journey. Already. I guess talk, and then I started this podcast a while ago before I even changed my major to mass communications, and the last month or so, I've been able to talk to a bunch of cool people I never dreamed I'd be able to interview.
Right. What's your ultimate goal then?
The ultimate goal is to have my own podcast like Joe Rogan, and ball out that way, work for myself, or work for ESPN and hopefully get like my own show on there.
Awesome. See, and you're already well on your way.
Mm-hmm.
Keep sending those emails. Those emails are critical, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I reach out to probably 50 people a day, and I get like 3 responses maybe. But
Hey.
I mean, it is what it is.
My mom's always told me the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so be the squeaky wheel.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So when you were growing up, what made you want to get into this field?
I've always loved sports. I played sports growing up. I played soccer growing up. My brother played football, soccer. We played every sport growing up. My dad was in the sports memorabilia business when I was growing up. So, and he's always been a big sports fan. He was an athlete growing up as well. So we had season tickets to pretty much everything because of his, job. So I would go to the Miami Heat games. Back then it was Florida Marlins, now the Miami Marlins. Dolphins games, Florida Panthers hockey games. So I was just always surrounded by it. I always loved it. I'm a daddy's girl through and through. So I spent a lot of time with my dad watching, and my grandparents were even into sports. When they would babysit me, we'd play ping pong, and that's just what it was. Big taught me to be competitive. So I've always loved sports, and I love human beings. I love people. I love their stories. I like to learn about people. So I kind of put the two together, and my love for sports and my love for people and telling their stories is what I found that I really liked. In high school, I got involved with my high school's media production, TV production class, and I did it all throughout high school. It's called CTV. That's really where I learned to edit and use a camera. I mean, I went to college and everything for that too, but that's really where I learned in high school, and that really solidified it for me. I knew I wanted to do it then, and I've just always sports, and I kind of mentioned it before, brings people together like nothing else at all. I believe that it's a unifier, no matter what is going on in the world, in the country, politically, racially. It brings people together in a really special way, even if it's just for a few hours. And I think there's something to be said about that. So I love being a part of it. It's something positive in this world, and that's why I do it.
So what was it like growing up in South Florida and being able to go to all those games quite frequently?
It was awesome. I mean, I'm very lucky. I was very lucky. Obviously, people here in Indianapolis love their sports. I will say people are a little bit probably more fair weather down in South Florida fans, because there's a lot more transplants, people coming from up north, and you have your Jets fans, you have all those. But they all, the New Yorkers love to move down to South Florida. But I was very lucky. I got to do a lot of things that a lot of people didn't. I met a lot of people, got some behind the scenes looks, especially with my dad's jobs. He had a lot of people come in for autograph sessions, so I would meet them, and I have notebooks and notebooks of autographs of people throughout my life. Obviously, a lot of them I don't know because I was so young, but just some cool memorabilia, but some pretty special stuff. I got to see the Marlins win the World Series, the Heat win a championship, got to go to the parades. My dad pulled me out of school for that. I got to see the Stanley Cup in South Florida. Came to the arena there. So some pretty cool opportunities getting to grow up there. There were so many different sports,
Mm-hmm. So looking back on like your childhood and being able to go to all those games, what do you see as the big differences between attending a sporting event as a member of the media as opposed to being a fan?
Well, now I find that I root less for my teams. I will always be a Heat fan. I'll always be a Dolphins fan. I'll always be a Marlins fan, Panthers fan. But you won't necessarily find me rooting as much. Obviously, if it's for like the playoffs or for a championship, like I'm all in. But that's the biggest difference. Is obviously, I stay pretty neutral, just because in my job it's obviously better if the Colts and Pacers win, and they tend to play my teams. So you just find yourself rooting a little bit less for the teams you always grew up for, and rooting for people more, the athletes that you cover. You want people that you get to know to do well. So I'll find that I'm watching a college football game. I went to Florida State, but I worked in Alabama. So I know a lot of Alabama and Auburn kids, and I would find myself rooting for Alabama, not for Alabama necessarily, but for the kids there, when they're playing Florida State, just because I want the kid that I covered to do better. So It's definitely different. It's different. You still enjoy it just as much. You just see a different perspective. You see more human beings than you do an athlete.
Mm-hmm. I kind of found that when I've covered some of the games I've covered. I mean, it's just like the first one I ever covered was just insane. We won. Purdue won against Wisconsin. They blew them out by like 20, and I just like couldn't believe I was like actually covering a Purdue sports game. It was insane to me.
Right. It is.
Yeah.
It's a cool feeling, like it's something you probably never expected to do. But then it just kind of becomes a routine, you look at it less of like this big giant thing and more of like your job, which is cool in a sense, but you kind of lose that fandom.
Yeah. It was really hard for me not to root for Purdue, but
hey, that's okay.
I mean,
Hey, look, if my teams are playing, I'll always underlyingly root for them. That's no question. But that's anyone in the media. Everybody grew up something. Everyone grew up something. Everyone grows up a fan of something. So it's okay.
So what were some of your favorite events that you've been able to cover?
Some of my favorite events. So obviously, if we're talking Indy 500, last year's Indianapolis 500 was incredible. It was a crazy finish between Alexander Rossi and Simon Pagenaud. It was obviously my first one, so the pageantry was just incredible, and the whole month of May was just a grind. If we're sticking with Indianapolis, when the Colts played in Kansas City, we went both times. We went last in 2018. 2018, which was really cool. Did not win. It was the playoffs. I guess it was 2019 then. It was 2018, 2019 season. All my years are so screwy right now. It was that season, so it was snowing like crazy, and it was just a really good time. And it was I guess the last time we saw Andrew Luck truly playing a real real game. It was postseason for the Colts. So that I'll always remember. And then the one we went to this past season, where they won in Kansas City, was really cool. And then I've been to several Iron Bowls between Alabama and Auburn. The one with the pick six where they stormed the field at Auburn. It was incredible. That was probably my top moment ever. And then I've been to 4 national championships. I saw Florida State, my alma mater, beat Auburn in the last national championship at the Rose Bowl. So some pretty special events. I've seen Alabama win a few, I've seen Clemson win a few. So some pretty cool moments.
What was it? Because were you at the game where Andrew Luck retired in the preseason?
Yes. And that is one I will always remember.
So talk a little bit about that. Like, what was that experience like being at that press conference?
That experience was different. Obviously, it was the third preseason game. Yes, the third preseason game. So it was the game that was slated that none of the starters would be starting. So we're there just because we have to be there. And, we're all sitting in the press box. We're all enjoying ourselves, all the media, because we really didn't, it's going to be a pretty relaxed night. And It was in the middle of the fourth quarter. So just like everybody else, nobody knew. Really and truly, nobody knew. And I looked over to my right or my left, and there was a couple of other local media members, and it looked like he saw a ghost. And I was like, what? And he showed me his phone, and it was Schefter. So I thought it was a fake one. There's all these spam bots that send out, fake Adrian Wojnarowski's for the NBA. They send out all these fake tweets. I was like, no way. Then all of a sudden, a matter of 2 minutes, it was like mayhem. And I just remember you could sense the stadium was starting to figure it out. And the press box is closed. Like there's glass, so you can't hear everything out there. But you could watch it. Andrew got escorted off the field. It was just, you could tell things were starting to break down. So we were all kind of in panic mode, like, now what? No one had really set up a press conference, and we came to find out later it was supposed to be the next day. So no one was really ready for it. Even the media relations people for the Colts were kind of scrambling. They didn't realize it was going to happen tonight. So Dave Calabro was off that night, and he got called in, and it just became a wall-to-wall coverage. We cut into programming, and it was just what we were finding out, we were feeding to the public, and we took him live at the podium. Everyone was shocked. He was shocked, even though he knew he was retiring, because he wasn't expecting to do it there. They closed the locker room because they knew the players wouldn't want to talk. And that was pretty much it. That was really the last we've seen of Andrew Luck. I have not seen him since, and he has not spoken to the media. So not because he doesn't want to, but because I think he's enjoying his life as a dad and doesn't really care. Yeah, it was an interesting night, one I will never forget, and one that turned upside down in about 2 minutes. So if there's anything I can get out of that, it's this business, you can come prepared, but you're never prepared. That's it.
Yeah, for sure. What was the feel like during that brief press conference afterwards?
What was the feel during and after it? During it, it was pretty emotional.
What was the feel?
It was pretty emotional. I mean, he was emotional. Jim Irsay was emotional. Frank Reich was emotional. Chris Ballard was emotional. So everyone was kind of just very intently listening. He was honest. He was real. And I think everyone in the room understood. I think the media all understood. I don't know if everyone outside the media really understood. And then afterwards, it was just kind of like the twilight zone. It almost just felt like, did that really just happen? Because this doesn't happen. This just doesn't happen. And it felt like it was the longest night ever. I remember it being 1 a.m. and just being like, what? I forgot you even had a game at that point. No one even cared about the game, obviously, but you forgot that they had even just played a game, because it felt so far away from what had just transpired. So it was kind of just it was almost like you didn't know whether to leave or stay or shut your phone off or go to sleep, because you didn't know what was going to come next, even though you knew at this point he was retired. So it was definitely a somber feel in there when it comes to the organization and all the higher ups in the Colts. The locker room, you can tell, was silent, and watching the players walk out they were pretty disappointed. You could just sense the air was sucked out of the building. And afterwards, it was just kind of well, I guess this is real, and you just kind of move on. It was strange.
So you talked about being at the FSU game when they won the chip. What are the big differences between football in the South compared to the Big Ten up here in the North?
It's completely different. That was the one thing when I moved up here that Dave Calabro told me is just don't expect your Saturdays to be the same. It's just the fandom is times 1,000. You don't have an empty seat in the house, even when they're playing a cupcake team. I wouldn't even say the level of football is that much better, but just the competition. It's so real and raw, and the passion is just, because the fans are so passionate, you just feel it more on the field. The rivalries are massive, just massive, and there's so many of them. I feel like they're rivals with everybody. It's just a different vibe. People live and breathe it down south. They live and breathe football. That's all they really have. Basketball's kind of starting to take shape at Alabama and Auburn, and all these, the SEC schools are really starting to step it up when it comes to that. But, the Big Ten is obviously more basketball based. And I would say they're way crazier basketball environments here.
Yeah.
But when it comes to football, there's no comparison.
Yeah. When you were at the FSU championship game, what was that feel like? Or how was that for you? I mean, growing up and going to FSU.
Yeah. So it was, I had just graduated that spring. So that was my first national championship, my first time covering one. And I just so happened to be covering my team, which was really, really special. But they were playing Auburn. So obviously I was really there mostly for Auburn. We covered Florida State a little bit too, because it's pretty close to Dothan, and we had some local kids on the team. So it was interesting because obviously I wanted my team to win, but covering a winning team is so much better when, afterwards you go into the Auburn locker room. It was the most miserable thing. It was the first experience I really had where football players were crying like that. But it was pretty special because it came down to just the final seconds and a touchdown, and I was actually on the field for it. And we were out in California, and you could see the mountains, and it was a historic game just because it was the last BCS game before they moved to the playoff format. It was pretty cool, and I was pretty excited. And I had friends in the stands who I went to college with, and still knew a couple of the players on the team. So it was pretty cool to just experience that as a media member, but also like, that's your alma mater. And I got to go for free. I essentially got to go watch my team play for free, even though I was obviously working, and it was a pretty much a 24-hour day. It was pretty cool.
So I wanted to get back to the interview aspect of your job.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any bad experiences interviewing players or coaches?
I get asked this sometimes, and really I haven't. People are pretty respectful. You have to kind of gauge like when someone wants to talk or not. There's going to be times where they tell you like, I don't want to talk, but no one's ever been disrespectful to me. No one has, gone off on me in the middle of an interview. No one has made me feel small for being a woman, and maybe not knowing as much about the intricacies of the game. So I've been pretty lucky. I know, obviously, some people have gone through that, but I really haven't had any moments to remember, I guess.
So you've covered almost every sport. Do you kind of research that specific sport or that specific game, whoever's playing, depending on who you're, or what sport you're covering? Or like I saw that you covered like a fishing thing.
Right.
So like, how did you go about preparing for that?
You got to just read. And there's going to be things that I don't know, but you have to just read. You do a lot of reading and you get to know the person, as opposed to, especially with the fishing thing. I was just following one guy, Jeff Sprague. I'm pretty sure is probably what you saw. And you get to know him, and you ask them questions, especially if you don't know, like they know I don't know about fishing. Like I'm not going to know. So you just kind of ask them, and they want to tell you, they want you to learn. So they love what they do. So they want other people to love it too. So you just kind of read about him and about the sport. You get the basics down, and then you go from there, and you'll always find a story. But when it comes to like football and basketball and baseball and your typical sports and racing, I can tell you what you need to know. I'm good in those areas. At that point, it's just making sure you know the matchup, making sure you know the key points of the game, making sure you know the key players of the game, and going in knowledgeable. Like you can't go in blind. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to study. You have to read, and different sources. It's important to read different sources and gather information from different places, because the more you read, the more prepared you will obviously be, and the more the viewers will realize you're doing your job.
Have you ever gone into a game where you realized you weren't prepared?
I guess that Andrew Luck game was a good one. Not really, because I try to make sure I take notes. I have a lot of notebooks. I got lots of notebooks around here. And I take notes, and you go into a game pretty much knowing what your storylines are. They obviously can change. But and you keep tabs on that during the game. And if you have to shift your focus at halftime, you shift your focus. But no, I think I've been pretty prepared for mostly everything. There's certain events that, like my first NASCAR race I ever covered, I did not grow up a race fan. So my first NASCAR race was a little bit overwhelming, but you ask questions, and once you do something once, it makes sense. You just have to go and get your feet wet. It's just the experience that I think is more important than anything. And then the more you read, the more it makes sense. It's like anything in school. If you have a test, you probably don't know anything about it until you read, you understand it, and you study, and it's the same concept.
Yep. So I've held you on here for close to 45 minutes. I know you're a busy person, so I'm gonna let you go. But thank you so much for doing this. It was a fun time.
It's fun time. I'm excited to see where you go. I'll see you at Purdue when basketball and football return. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun. And go watch Ozark, okay?
All right, for sure. I will. All right.